Hello and welcome to the Bitcoin.review podcast, where we explore developments and projects with the people who actually make them happen. The show is supported by Pod 2.0, SAT Streaming, and CoinKite. If you're a new listener, I'm NVK. I run CoinKite, where we've been helping people secure their Bitcoins for over a decade. We make the Coldcard and fun products like the Block Clock. You can find more information about it on CoinKite.com. Hello, and welcome back to the Bitcoin.review, the therapy podcast, mostly for the host and guests. Maybe you are too, I don't know. Anyways, today I have with me Mr. Paul.
Hello.
Mr. Craig.
Good to be back.
And Alex B.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
So guys, the vulnerability disclosures here look nice and spicy. I don't think we talked about the XZ in the last pod. I think it might have come out the day after. So this is a fun one. Somebody spent 2 years, even got paid, building trust to sneak in a nice backdoor into a Linux package. And it was only really found because somebody was not very happy with the performance of the package and decided to go take a look. It was very poor work, by the way, by the guy who did the vulnerability. You'd think he would optimize a little bit. It's just very interesting because we've been talking about this kind of attack for, God knows, decades, right, in open source, and how this is the scary stuff. It's a trusted contributor who gains trust and then sneaks in the bad stuff under everybody's eyes. So what do you guys have to chat about this?
This is terrifying. I love that it's from fuzz testing. I mean, you're criticizing the guy's code, but I mean, there's so much impressive engineering that goes into this attack where it's, it's no single like commit was the attack. It's a stack of vulnerabilities that play off of each other, and it's like rewriting the make files or something at like doing stuff at like build time. It's just there's so much wild stuff in here that it's very hard to imagine how. I probably like the biggest takeaway is like don't let people commit binaries.
That would be one thing, right?
But there's so much here.
Yes, never commit a binary. I know it's easy to say, but it's hard to achieve that when you have, especially on Linux. Linux is an absolute clusterfuck if we're being honest, right? I mean, it's like this ginormous thing with multiple distributions and multiple packages and multiple package managers and, 50 different options for every program you want to use, or even just the tiny libraries have 50 options as well. So it's is this ginormous attack surface, right? And now that's when I bring a little bit of FreeBSD into this because, on FreeBSD, on the other hand, you have 5 guys really who maintain it. SQLite, also 3 guys who maintain it. Sparrow Wallet, 1 guy who maintains it. Coldcard, I try to not even touch it anymore because I don't have really good stuff to contribute. So it's really just Doc Hex and Android now who contribute. I find that less is a lot more in open source, especially security open source. and we're learning that everything that we were expecting to happen happens, right? I mean, it's not FUD. That is how it works. Hey, Harry, welcome to the show, sir.
What's up, brother?
We pressed record a little too fast.
That's cool.
It's all the whole eclipse thing is sort of messing up with my brain,
Yeah, I mean, somewhere between the chemtrails and the solar flares, what are we to do?
That's right. So, yeah, I mean, just going back to this attack, I don't think, because, I still remember, I think it was actually Vlad, who's now loved on Twitter, who one time made fun of Coldcard Codebase, saying that there weren't a lot of contributors on the Coldcard Codebase. And it's really funny, right? Because that's kind of the feature, not a bug.
the point.
That's the whole point, right?
That's the point.
Yes.
Decentralization doesn't mean everybody, there's no participation trophies for decentralized theater,
No.
right? There's only meritocratic contributions. The point is that anyone can contribute. It doesn't mean anyone should contribute or any contribution will be included.
No, it's actually quite the opposite. I mean, like, when you work, especially in a security project, like, you don't want contributions. Like, you want people to find bugs, report bugs, absolutely, right? But, like, even a change to a doc file is going to be scrutinized and it's going to eat up time from devs. So it's like, ideally, don't make a pull request. Just, like, let the maintainers know that there is an issue with something and let them code it, because more often than not, reviewing a pull request is actually way more work than just writing the feature yourself. So yeah, it's amazing.
I only thought about this just now, but it's actually it's important to keep in mind when considering the demand or people that claim that we should have more Bitcoin implementations, because there is a real risk here when you consider the process that goes into Bitcoin Core as far as reviewing outside any contributors, pull requests or whatnot. I mean, it's something that's been, refined over more than a decade now, whereas a new implementation will not have the resources or ability to sort of granularly review every single thing like this. So it speaks to the downside of trying to have different implementations rather than one that's well reviewed and well maintained.
Craig, I was just like remembering when Vlad made fun of the Coldcard code base, saying that there wasn't a lot of contributors versus the Trezor code base that had like hundreds of contributors. And I was saying, like, yes, this is a feature, not a bug, right? Like, Sparrow, Craig probably prefers that nobody like actually makes pull requests the same way we don't. Like, it's like we want less contribution. Like, please report issues, like test and let us know how things are working. Stuff like contribute that way, but don't write code for me, please.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to you have to be responsible for every line of code. I think that's the key word. You have to be responsible. So, you either have a team and you have very serious code review where every single PR goes through many, many reviews, and many projects do this and do it well. But, it's just extremely onerous, both personally and professionally. Everything has to get reviewed.
I mean, every byte, right? Like, you could have some serious issues on mission critical software that touches encryption because of a byte, right? That is in the wrong place.
It reminds me of like when you have like a real tiny, like a 3-line pull request and it gets like a huge discussion of like, oh, I think we should do it this way. And, it's like, it's easy to pile in and have an opinion on a 3-line pull request.
Yes.
And then someone shows up with like a 1,000-line pull request and it's like, it looks good to me. It works on my machine. And that was kind of what happened here is like, as far as I understand, like the vulnerability stuff I think it's in the make file were in lines that were kind of a long distance from each other.
Yes.
So like literally designed to be hard to read for a reviewer to pick up on this like cumulative attack.
Yeah, no, it is pretty brutal, right? And it really goes to show, one, how important the source being available or open, however you want to put this, like religiously or not, but like how important it is for the source to be available for people to read, right? And on the case of Bitcoin projects and products, like how important it is to be reproducible, right? Because like, the code that is like on GitHub, yeah, it's amazing and we can catch the bugs, but then if people don't reproduce it, right, and don't check signatures, then you can even have that same vulnerability in the binary that's being distributed, right? Like there is a lot of foot guns in this whole process, and none of this stuff is really realistically available to users, right? I mean, most users, 99.9999% of users would never be able to even comprehend the scope and the attack surface that there is in the whole stack of like the code being written by somebody and being delivered to their device, right? So we have all this sort of like layers of webs of trust and sort of like good practices and good protocols that help us sort of like deliver safety in a practical way, right? I mean, it is quite remarkable, right, that like there is so few attacks that happen from some malicious sort of like intent in between the parts on most of the source available or open source projects, right? It's a testament to the good practices and the webs of trust that we have. It's billions. It's almost it's $1 trillion now worth of Bitcoin out there. I guarantee you that more than half of it depends on, say, libsec, right? Like,
one thing I found encouraging in this whole thing is like a lot of the YouTube videos about this, like one of the most popular comments on it would be NSA taking a lot of L's lately. And so just like there's not, the contributor to this did not sign this, like yours truly, the NSA,
right.
The person who revealed the vulnerability didn't say like, hey, the NSA told me about this, thanks to the fine men and women at the NSA. People just assume that the NSA is trying to break our security infrastructure. And that's bullish because, you have to know, who you're up against. It's hard to like say specifically in any case, there's a lot of people who had the motivation to do this, but the people who have the time and patience to do something this sophisticated, it's not a lot. And it's good that it seems like it's a widespread meme that the NSA is on that team.
It's funny enough, I don't even think this one is NSA. It's too low-hanging fruit, even though it's so advanced. Because, see, like, the way I look at this is all systems are compromised, period. Just assume that. And, for example, when it's known that when the spooks want access to servers, right, they just crash the server, a dude goes there, copies the whole drive, and then puts it back. Seriously, like, Hertzinger is known for this. When you have a drive failure, it's probably because the spooks are there copying your drive, right? Like, it's like, these guys, like, when you're talking about like serious state actors, well-funded state actors, these guys are playing at a whole different level, right? I mean, like, you look at the SGX on Intel, right? Like, I mean, that thing has been broken in so many levels now, and it's still deployed. I mean, like, half of like Amazon security stuff is running on SGX, right? Like, and it's fully owned. Like, everybody knows it's owned. But like, you have to essentially like pick your battles, right? Like, you have to like sort of like you do your security based on like which adversary you don't want it to see what. But they're looking at everything, and it's quite remarkable. And just to beat on a dead horse because it's fun, and then you look at like stuff like the Raspberry Pi, right? Where it's pre-programmed from factory, right? Like, it is not something that you can build yourself. Like, buying the board and loading the OS on it, it's not building yourself. And folks are using this for Bitcoin. It's like, it's just amazing to me, the cognitive dissonance that happens sometimes in this space. But it's important that like we autistically remind everybody like where each part of the system like has trade-offs. Like, everything has trade-offs. We can't just sort of like hand wave saying, hey, this one is false, therefore good or safe. That one is this or that one is that. Like, I think a lot of times in this space, the immediate cop-out, easy heuristic will get people in trouble. I mean, but we can all agree that JavaScript is shit. But aside from that...
I was looking at the list, and if you're a Raspberry enjoyer, it's going to be a tough podcast for you, I think.
Talking about the Raspberry Pi, any more comments on XZ before I move on? Because this one was a big one. This one was mainstream.
Yeah, I think you just have to be, if you see new people coming in to develop a piece of software that you rely on, you should just check in and see what's going on. I think that, I certainly use XZ and certainly have no idea who was building it. So, I'm not at that level, but it does feel that, that's when the vulnerability actually happened, right? When the guy who wanted to put this thing in got some control, right? I wonder what the situation is now and what the path forward for XZ is. It would be interesting to know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's and it's not going to stop. I just like, this is like this is what, like, when we found out there is like another, like, million things out there. That's why it's so important to design things in terms of unknowns, and not even maliciously. It's just like, there will be bugs. Therefore, don't connect things to the internet if they're sensitive. Like, it's not that complicated.
I have normie questions as the non-technical member of this podcast. One is, NBK, you just mentioned what I was going to say, which is I feel like there's a bit of an iceberg theory here, which is that we're just seeing something above the water level today.
Absolutely.
There's a lot under the water, and I have no idea how broad or deep it goes.
There is a great talk, on that point, by HKP 2014. I must have brought up this talk like a few times on the spot already. Go watch it. It's called Operation Orchestra, and it's talking exactly about this, how like they will exploit like social engineering on open source to try to introduce bugs and things. Like, it is a fantastic talk.
The second is the positive, which is that we don't see a lot of Bitcoin getting stolen. And so there's a huge honeypot. Thank goodness we have the honeypot to prove that our game theoretic superposition remains reasonably intact. Because if there was mass exploitable surface area, it would be. There's enough money to determine that. So I take comfort in that, and then use, whatever best practices we can. Don't touch the internet. Don't touch the USB cord. Don't,
Yeah, don't plug it in.
I love when I get into, even just with your phone, I love when I get into like cars or conferences, and they just have all these charging cables available.
Yes.
No, thank you.
And your phone is like, hello, talk to me on radios. On like, There's, I think, 53 radios on a modern iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of them is like, please talk to me.
Yeah. So I think, just don't plug it into anything. The battery charging.
Yeah.
The magnetic charge is a great invention.
Well, we're gonna get there too. So I guess then the next one is this LoLRa project, transmitting LoLRa packets without radio. So this is really cool, actually, because if you have played with Raspberry Pis like many years ago, somebody figured out how to modulate AM radio, so amplitude modulation, with the pinouts, the I/O ports on a Raspberry Pi. So essentially, even though it's not connected to anything, okay, you can use the I2C and modulate, the amplitude of the waves on essentially the pins of the device. And then you can transmit radio out, okay? Now, somebody figured out how to do LoLRa, okay? Why is LoLRa so cool? LoLRa is like military tech that came out a few years ago commercially. It's called spread spectrum. It's very complicated shit. But the key here is it's super amazing at essentially delivering low power, long distance radio with data. It was designed for essentially like low power sensors and things like that to send out data, right? I bet there was like, they're fake rocks in the middle of Afghanistan, like to like measure if there's people around, and then sends a signal, based on like some tiny amount of like solar power, for example, right? So anyways, with this attack, you could make a Raspberry Pi board, send out data, even though it's not connected to anything. Yay, right?
Just to be clear, because I'm checking this out right now, it would be transmitting over radio in the abstract, but not using a specific hardware radio that is on the device.
Yes, you can use your Neo clippers and take out the Wi-Fi traces. You can take out the Bluetooth traces. This is using the board itself, right? The pins, the traces on the board as the antenna. So this is just a software attack that causes a hardware effect. Let's put it this way.
Sounds like a feature. You get a radio for free.
Right? it's great if you're not using a Raspberry Pi as a hardware wallet. And this is why it's so important to choose the platforms that are correct for the things you're trying to do, right? So, for example, the Raspberry Pi was never designed to be more than an educational board that's cheap for, kids in Africa or something, right? And it's very easy to develop to because it's closed and you don't have to do anything hardware-wise in order to make it work. It's just a Linux computer, right? A Linux computer is a very complex device. And there's a reason why we don't use computers for large amounts of Bitcoin, right? Because it's kind of dangerous. Because there is all this attack surface. It's the same goes to a Raspberry Pi. It's just a smaller computer, but it's still a massive computer in there. And unfortunately, Broadcom, being this evil corp that it is, makes everything close. Everything is not available. It's pre-programmed from factory. You can't just buy the chips and build a Raspberry Pi yourself. Unlike most of the hardware wallets in the market, you can buy the chips and program the chips themselves. So you're removing one layer of concern there, the biggest one, really. And then, you're not running also Linux on top of that, which is super complex as well. And it's more, attack surface, right? Like look at the XZ attack, right? The idea is when you're building a hardware wallet, right? You're trying to make things as simple as possible. You're trying to make things as open as possible and as reproducible as possible. Because then you'll have very little attack surface to go review, ideally with very few contributors.
Just to be clear, this was it LoLRa?
LoLRa. Oh yeah, the attack is LoLRa.
LoLRa.
That's great.
But it looks like it runs on multiple. It looks like it's ESP32, ESP8.
Yes.
So it's like it's multiple processors, not like a Raspberry Pi specific. You're just talking about the fact that Raspberry Pi has these closed aspects means you couldn't audit whether or not this is happening.
The difference is you could write a small enough package that's running on the boot ROM of the Raspberry Pi, for example, that is closed, and when you run the OS on top, you wouldn't know, right? On the ESP32, because you're dealing with lower level, it's a lot harder to do this without somebody finding out. And it's a lot more, it's smaller, there's less memory. You're bound to say, where does 100K of RAM went? And then you find the problem, right? Like having things that are very limited are very important when you're dealing with like high security things. And with this attack, if you really optimize this and you have sensitive equipment outside, I mean, you could be reading this from like a neighbor's house, maybe even further away. This is known, by the way, in the chip industry as a side channel attack often, right? So, for example, there are many chips that are not designed to do cryptography in them, so they will leak the math happening, the math calculation happening electronically, right? So the EMF, right? So it creates a radio signal, right? Because there's like electrons being moved there. And then you can read. So like you can put an antenna near the chip and you can read the chip doing the math. So what secure chips do is prevent this kinds of attacks, right? And then there's like a whole rabbit hole of like the trade-offs, the levels in which they can do things. But again, it's very important. So, for example, in hardware wallets, one thing that most hardware wallets do is like they don't make the traces that do things that are important too long, because long traces means they act like an antenna, and you can pick up them from further away. That's why when you're doing anti-10-pass attack on keyboards, you randomize the input of keyboards so that somebody can't just read the keyboard from far away. The rabbit hole is really crazy with these kinds of attacks. And anyways, I think maybe we should move to the other hardware attacks just to keep on going. Then we go back to that list in order. Just jacking attack and bad USB. Yeah, so just jacking attack. This one is fun. So essentially, they're using a flipper zero to attack devices when they go in the QI charger. I think this was misnamed. It really is a HID attack. HID is the human interface device standard. So, for example, when you tap an NFC card or something like that, So with this attack, they were able to put malware into phones that were being charged on these QI chargers that were fake QI chargers. They were really just, careful with your phones.
Wait, they can hijack a wireless charger, or you're talking about USB?
No, they need to have specialized hardware. Like it's essentially a fake charger.
Right, it's USB, right?
No, no, it's the other one, the QI one, the NFC. It's the wireless charger.
Trying to find that.
I think like the most important thing about these attacks, or like essentially interface attacks, is it's like you don't have to get caught up on like what did they achieve to do with the attack so much as to like it is possible to open this door, right? And then like given enough time, people figure out what to do with the door. and like this is why it's so scary. All right. Anybody read the BitVM bridges considered unsafe?
Yes. Yeah, I have.
Go for it.
So basically, the argument is that there is a collateral issue with BitVM bridges. And so with the way that BitVM bridges work, generally speaking, and it's hard to say. I mean, it's hard to be specific because there are several implementations or attempts to implement BitVM bridges. But generally, they all fall along the lines of a user would deposit into this end-to-end contract. And once they attempt to withdraw, what happens is that the Bitcoins that they're trying to withdraw does not actually come out from the multi-sig contract. The Bitcoin that they attempt to withdraw is actually fronted by the operator of the bridge, so that the operator, once he's properly executed the withdrawal, can then go back to the BitVM contract and submit the proof of that withdrawal and sort of like play or a claim of that withdrawal and then play that game. Well, he doesn't really have to play that game unless someone attempts to claim that he cheated. But basically, he gets to be refunded from the funds that are in the multisig. And so the way you can imagine that playing out is that, say there's $1 billion now in a BitVM bridge, and people start attempting to make withdrawals at a significant rate. The problem that the operators are faced with is that they need an adequate amount of collateral for them to be able to front those withdrawals before they're able to go and claim their funds back from the BitVM contract. And so obviously there's kind of a dynamic here that plays out where it's like, well, unless the operator really has a 1-for-1 reserve of Bitcoins for them to operate the bridge, meaning that if there's $1 billion in the bridge, they kind of need to have like $1 billion of collateral put aside for them to service those withdrawals. Otherwise, what happens is if there is a very high spike in demand for withdrawal within a certain period, and the operator fails to actually be able to service those withdrawals, then depending on the implementation, the operator can first off, the operator obviously is kind of like kicked out of the BitVM contract and does not have access to any of the funds anymore. But also, there are implementations where the operator has a certain stake that gets slashed, right, because they were considered dishonest. So you can easily sort of imagine scenarios where there's kind of like a run on the bank. And the problem that happens, therefore, is that, I mean, this is something that was kind of known, to be fair, amongst most of the people that are actively working and implementing BitVM bridges. But I think the reason why this was sort of put out into this article was to make people keenly aware, because now we're facing a situation, where there are a bazillion teams that are getting funded for BitVM bridges and layer 2 projects without, it seems, a full evaluation from the community at wide and the industry at wide as to whether or not BitVM even works at all, right?
Right. I mean, I don't think that people who are on that stuff even care, right? I mean, it's like they just want to do their shitcoin and then like extract value and then move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, so it's created. I mean, there are a lot of arguments that are made from, I guess, the people in BitVM circles that the claim is exaggerated and overblown in the sense that there are precautions that can be taken so that those types of bank runs or liquidity mismatching don't happen. And what we're talking about here is obviously kind of like throttling the withdrawal amounts for BitVM users and lengthening the withdrawal windows so that, it's kind of like a similar scenario that you would have seen with drive chains where it's like you put in a withdrawal and you only get your money back after, say, 2 weeks or however long the arbitrary period is. And then they make the argument similar to what Paul was making with drive chain that, well, if someone wants their money faster, then there can be some kind of like arbitrage game where people are going to buy up the funds that are perhaps in a distressed BitVM instance so that the users can get out cheaply and then everything else will be resolved by the magic of the market. It's a bit of a dubious argument, or at least it doesn't really, don't think will make people comfortable with the idea.
I find that like most of these projects, it's like they just wave their hands and like, oh, it works. Look, it's complicated, but it works. And then sort of like, they all essentially hit a wall. It's just like a matter of time and a matter of scale, but they hit this like hard walls and either somebody loses money or goes nowhere.
Yeah, so most likely what happens, at least probably with the first iterations of that, is that there will be sort of like a multi-sig backstop to the process, where if the operator or whatever, because there can be multiple operators as well, they all kind of like get their turn as in terms of like being able to service the withdrawals, but there could be a backstop where the withdrawals fall back to the original multi-sig and then the funds are taken out from the actual contract. In which case, what happens here is that then the security of the system is not really any better than just any other multi-sig or federation. So it seems superfluous to have everyone be dancing through the BitVM dance if it's not very effective at doing what it claims to achieve.
Yeah.
This write-up mentions covenants. It says, because we do not have covenants, the only option in a BitVM setup is yada yada. Do covenants fix part of this or any of this?
Probably. I mean, then they can just like the problem is like all of these projects, all of them, they're essentially trying to get around the fact that you cannot have a output restriction, right? There is no output restriction. There is only input restriction, right? Like that's all of them are the same problem, right? Like you can't programmatically prevent a Bitcoin from like having a requisite aside from the signature in Bitcoin right now, right? Well, maybe time locks.
Yeah, time locks.
But but aside from that, like there is nothing else, right? So they have to create this huge Goldberg machines to like get around that. But at the end of the day, somebody has to sign something if it's not a chain restriction. So, as soon as you have somebody to sign it, you have a script that probably rules that signature or an oracle or something, and then you're back into the same fucking problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that BitVM is sort of based on Matt, M-A-T-T, which was work from Salvatore at Ledger, who originally came up with this idea of Merkle tree, sort of like those kind of like Merkleized tree contracts. And Matt, in and of itself, was a proposed sort of like a proposal for an opcode into Bitcoin. And I think there is I'm not going to say this is the motivation behind the article, but I know that in OPCat circles, there is the impression at least that using OPCat, you are able to emulate the MAT construct and therefore be able to effectively achieve something that's very similar to BitVM without a lot of the complexity of BitVM in the sense that everything,
But that requires cat.
yeah, in the sense that everything needs to be pre-signed and all of that. But that requires cat.
Yeah, like all of which is a kind of covenants in a way, right? Like
Yeah, which allows you to make covenants, obviously.
yeah, that's essentially the problem, right? It's just everybody goes around in circles because like creating this really bad, complicated solutions because you can't get around that. Yeah.
Complexity is itself bad. I mean, what I'm seeing a lot of is these really complex solutions now that, I don't know how everyone feels about them, but it takes a lot of time just to understand one. And often you kind of get down to it and you realize that the thing is ultimately secured, at least in some sense, by a social mechanism, by sort of a game theory mechanism rather than mathematics. And I don't actually have a major issue with that in the way Bitcoin itself is secured by game theory, but it is somewhat unprovable. You can prove maths. You can't prove game theory. You can theorize about it and you can guess how people will react to each other and how things will work. But unfortunately, you simply can't know until you actually put it out there into the world. And that's what makes it quite hard to analyze a lot of these really complicated proposals, is that they don't come down ultimately to hard provable math. They come down to some form of game theory, at least in some kind of scenario that you sort of ended. That's something that I'm seeing more of. I'm just saying it is what it is. I'm not saying it's wrong to look at these things, but it is, one should be very cautious about putting money into anything where game theory secures at least part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, but like CTV has been beaten to death and it's surprisingly reasonable. It is kind of backed by math, right? Like you're just checking a template there. Of course, it's going to have a lot of like unwanted consequences, right? Because you're going to be able to do like all these other million things that you couldn't do before with Bitcoin. And I don't know, like I feel like I was starting to think that we would get maybe covenants on Bitcoin. But then the more I see the people sort of like arguing about it and talking about it, the more I see how there's absolute lack of consensus and we're not getting there. So, it kind of makes me feel good about it. As much as I want some of this stuff personally, I don't necessarily feel confident about like wanting it for Bitcoin, like really there. So I don't know. And I feel like there is a Twitter niche for people that want this stuff. But once you get out of Twitter, like people are just very happy with number go up and censorable. So like, I really think that we might not get anything for like, it's still a very long time. It's like Bitcoin working as designed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think CTV itself is really, is a good candidate for what I was talking about. I think CTV itself is relatively well understood.
Mm-hmm.
It's the various things that are built on it, and I'm not saying again that everything built on CTV is somehow suspect, but I have seen quite a few, designs where you sort of get into certain areas like, how do we secure mass withdrawals from a shared UTXO? Those kind of things often come down in some sense or in some scenarios to a form of game theory. I'm not saying that is always the case, but, it does feel that may work. It may not work. We just don't know until we try, but we should be pretty cautious about putting too much in funds there until we know. So it's more just, to state that we are kind of reaching that sort of phase in the scalability. If you look at Lightning, it has some game theory involved, some pretty extreme game theory. If you try to steal, you lose all your funds, everything. So they've kind of gone, and I think that was maybe a good approach, just to kind of make it super extreme from a game theory point of view. But a lot of the sort of more recent proposals I'm seeing have a little bit more nuanced game theory to them. It's just interesting. I'm just kind of trying to observe it from one step back.
Yeah.
Sorry, just quickly. I mean, Jeremy made like a similar point just over the last week, where he was like, why is everyone trying to come up with the most convoluted coin pool proposal. He said like we need like a grog brain fucking coin pool, as simple as can be, so that we can actually perhaps at least demonstrate how it is executed from a technical perspective. And there might already be caveats there, but it is indeed, I guess. I mean, it's the nature of people. I think people fail to accept that like layer one properties do not scale for every single user on the planet. And we had an attempt with Lightning. I guess we were naive enough at one point to believe that this was the solution. And since it appears to be pretty clear now that to a certain extent it's not, people don't necessarily haven't given up on these ideals. You see it in conversation about, zero knowledge proof and whatever. But certainly whenever you try to address that problem, which as far as I'm concerned is intractable, like there's no solution to that. It's always going to be a reality. The only thing you can come up with are very, very complex systems
Yes.
That will try and abstract a reality that's inescapable, really.
I mean, if you're L2, you're bound by 4 megabytes, and that's it. Like, there's nothing you can do. In one way or another, you go back to the space that's available for throughput, right? And and I think people are realizing that Bitcoin is not for payments. It works now. It's great. I love using Lightning to buy beer, but if Bitcoin is successful and there is a lot of transactions going through it, it's just going to be economically not possible. I mean, it's kind of like something beaten to death, I think.
This is why I've been so bullish on Fedimint recently, just because it puts that trust model very front and center. It's like, this is what you're trusting. It's this multi-sig. This is what's going on, and then we're doing as much as we can, with, privacy and eCash and blinded tokens, all the kind of stuff to make it as good as possible. But here's the trust model. This is what you're trusting.
Yeah. I mean, I think all these things kind of got discussed to death back in the block wars. The people trying to find ways of doing, throughput with the Bitcoin base layer sort of got forked out because there's trade-offs on everything. And, if you change one variable, another one is going to, go in a different direction. It is what it is. So, all right, let's talk one more here. Nunchuk. I wouldn't call it uncover a security weakness in Kaz's new inheritance planning. It's just, and I think Lop sort of discussed this. It's more like I think it's a design decision there that they have a different one. I think there is this new inheritance solution that Kaza has makes a lot of trade-offs, and you can use it differently. So you could use the shared backup key to be a hardware wallet instead of the app and stuff. So you could improve on that. But I think the target market they're going for doesn't really care. So I think it's sort of goes that way. Do you guys have any comments on that, or should we jump into the software updates?
I don't have a comment on that specifically, but you had another one down the list. I think it's worth touching on briefly, which was the Breez DDoS attack.
Sure. That
happened last week. And I guess the point that I want to make, because there was this conversation also happening last week or the other week about whether or not, you could centralize Lightning. And I think we have a couple of items also down the list that will kind of complement this conversation. But it's probably realistic for people to understand that at this moment, for Lightning to work, at least as efficiently and as reliably as it might do for users, we are relying heavily on an amount of LSP that I can count like on a single hand, probably. And so when considering whether or not Lightning in itself, the protocol, can be centralized, from a technical perspective, perhaps not, but from a liquidity and economic perspective, it seems obvious that there are risks here wherein, say, Breez and Phoenix and River and whoever else is like Voltage get DDoS in a single day. I mean, I would venture to say that the Lightning Network is going to be practically unusable unless you have your own node connected to your counterparty node. But good luck routing anything through the network.
Yep.
So hopefully, I think there's efforts to perhaps bring about more LSPs, and I think that's pretty valuable, and we should work towards doing a lot of that, and hopefully more LSPs that are outside of the US as well.
Right.
There's this LSP spec that is kind of standardizing some of this LSP stuff. Mutiny right now uses Voltage, but we have like work in progress support for the LSPS spec. I think we could also use Zeus without the Olympus LSP without too much changes. Now Phoenix is a server that you can just run. So I do think it's being worked on, but yes, right now it is one handful for sure.
It's kind of funny, right? Like, I just wish there was nuance on the conversation. It's like, Lightning is not broken. It's just not scalable in certain ways.
Lightning is broken. It's not a unicorn.
Exactly, right? But people just like cling on to these things. Like, it's like there's this one device, this one technology that is just going to save us all because it's a lot easier to think about problems when you have like a single unicorn solution, right? All right. We are 50 minutes in. We need to get to the software updates. All right. Bitcoin Core wallet skip BNB when SFFO is enabled. They have a bunch of other little fixes there. RPC fix get raw transaction segfault. Keep the cookie logs. The P2P network changes. Create I2P session using. I'm not gonna read that spec. And what else? Build harden runtime on macOS release builds. That's nice. And some updates to the CI. Coldcard Q version 1.1.0. Scan any QR and report if it's part of a wallet Coldcard knows. So multi-sig or single sig. It searches the first 1,500 addresses. And it caches it. So it indexes them all. So the second time you do it is fast. Store data as accelerated with future use, blah, blah, blah. It can take a while if you have a lot of multi-sigs. I think somebody pinged me saying that they had like 8, I think, multi-sigs on the same cold card. So it took them a little while. Calculator login mode. So it works as a calculator. And if you do the first parts of the pin dash, it will show you the anti-phishing word so you can log into the rest. There's also, Craig, a few more QR fixes coming and improvements coming as well.
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh, and I think the boys from Seedhammer are working on non-compact seed QR codes. I have a feeling that in the coming weeks and months, we're going to see a lot of departure from compact QRs. The hardware folks are coming around to understand why you don't want a binary QR for modules that read QRs. It's like limitations of, shitty sort of, affordability on modules. And the cool thing is if you remove a little bit of the error correction, which you don't need because you're scanner QRs, the QR codes are the same size. It's the same grid.
Yeah.
For compact versus.
Yeah, I'm actually not the biggest fan of compact seed QR. I have no issue with seed QR. Compact seed QR is like literally just the bytes. There's no header, no description, nothing. It's literally just the most small possible QR code, which as a design goal, I think was interesting and certainly worth trying. But I think that the outcome is something where you just literally looking at a series of bytes and then you're meant to say, well, I think this is a seed, and then you use it as a seed. When we get to seeds, I just like a little bit more. That's my own view on it. So that's a different angle on compact seed QR. I prefer seed QR myself.
Yeah, originally, I completely understand exactly like the design for the same reasons you have. But originally, was for people to write QRs by hand, right? Which, like you can have different opinions. I don't like it, but like people do. People are free to do that. So then the requirement should really be sort of like rethought as okay, so the requirement is not that it be a headless binary amount of data, right? Like it be a small grid. That's the real requirement, right? Because humans can't read binary anyway, so it doesn't matter to them. So, if we fiddle with the QR standard, which is designed to be fiddled, right? Like error correction and like there's a few other parameters there, then can we get to the same grid size, and still be as legible or more. And I think that's what the folks from Seed Hammer, because they do hammer those down, Hammer Time, they require, like, they want the smallest as possible, right? Of course, in the grid. So they did a little bit of math, and it looks like we can get to the same, so which is great. So we can have better legible QR data and similar trade-offs, similar specs on the size of the grid of the QR. So I'm pretty happy about that. And also talking to them about barbecue QR for descriptors. So I think the descriptor, because, Andrew Chow, fuck it, let's take the tangent. Andrew Chow denied adding the descriptor backup to the PSPT, which is very fair. Like, it maybe shouldn't be, like, it doesn't belong there. We're all just trying to find a hole to stick it in. and there is no real standard yet either. So there's some work on that. There is demand for it, right? People want to back up their descriptors. So people are sort of like talking to each other and trying to figure out the best way to go about that. I think it's promising.
I know it's not your favorite approach, but I mean, the blockchain commons approach is out there. It is certainly one of the contenders for how do we get an output descriptor into a QR, and it's the one Sparrow uses now.
Mm-hmm.
There is a versioned approach to it. Sparrow is outputting the version 1 now. There is a version 3. I'm waiting to see if it gets into a more finalized state. It's only a sort of a research proposal at this stage. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. The Seed Hammer guys I know have put a lot of time and thought into that as well. So we'll see where we end up. I'm just going to keep on doing things the way that Sparrow does them right now, and wait to see if we move to a better place in future.
That reminds me, when we first launched Coldcard, PSPT was still draft, so we had to change PSPT spec for the Mark 1. That's like how it kind of happens when you break new ground, right? Yeah, I don't take issue with the descriptor standard like at all. It really is. It's just a literal way in which they process QRs and how that part of the standard works that, like, I don't like it. But anyways, I feel like the people who are doing most amount of work on this sort of category is the Seed Hammer guys. I'm sure they're going to figure out where they're going, and they're going to play, like, they're going to talk to all the parts, the parties, and sort of try to find a path of least damage and most outcome. I think it's in everybody's interest. I mean, we don't really care. I mean, we already export descriptors for Bitcoin Core, right? It's just like, and we put that on a QR too. So it's already there. If people want to hard type that, that's when things get trickier, but I have a feeling that we'll get somewhere. And that actually goes with the topic after this one, which is HWI version 3. Add the emulators, options for enumerate the detect emulators, and rebuild attempt to avoid antivirus false positives. So Andrew Chow release.
Yeah, I thought I would talk a little bit about that because it's been a journey for me. So I didn't know a massive amount. Obviously, I'm not a Windows user. I do not know a massive amount about viruses because I never really have to experience them. I think I did actually. I was thinking maybe like a decade or two back, have a virus on my Windows machine way back in the day. But, it's just not something that I deal with all the time. So what happened with this, we had HWI 2.4.0 that was released, and for some random reason, it triggered a whole lot of antivirus checkers like Norton and just a whole bunch of them. And so I thought, well, this is clearly something that you can just overcome, right? It's obviously a false positive. You can go, it's a source reproducible build. You can go and check that you've actually built the source. Clearly, this is a false positive. There's no doubt about that. All we have to do is go and contact these antivirus vendors and tell them, submit a false positive report, which you can do on their site. And then before too long, they will correct their systems and you'll be fine. It turns out that it doesn't help to file false positive reports at all. They don't even look at them. They tell you that they're going to look at them. And then after a while, you realize no one's actually doing anything. They simply don't care. They really, really, really don't care.
There is no reproducible shit on Windows, by the way. Like, it exists, but like, it's not part of the lexicon. It's not part of their culture. It's not part of anything there.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal.
So anyway, the long and the short of it is either you have to deal with the fact that your users just constantly run into a wall of saying my antivirus doesn't like this, or you have to rebuild, which is just a really shitty outcome, but it is currently the only outcome that I can see. You simply can't win against these really large antivirus vendors. They own their users, they own the users' sort of operating systems, and a Windows user who gets told when they're running their Bitcoin software, you may have a virus. I mean, they're gonna freak out. So, yeah, it was just a really unpleasant experience of, again, how just truly awful the user experience on Windows is, and how difficult it is as an open source developer to really do anything about it. You really just the issue unfortunately comes back to you, and you have to rebuild.
For perspective,
so that was my experience.
Antiviruses on Windows are very similar to certificate authorities on the internet. They have root access to the keys and to your system. It's absolutely brutal. Like, you either work with it or it doesn't work. It's disgusting. But, Windows is a clusterfuck and there is nothing they can do. It's either that, or, every bank branch is like, already full is full of malware. It's just going to be like 1,000 times more. Who knows? Maybe Microsoft one day goes away. BDK version 1.0.0-alpha.8 explicitly state the truncate file for create new, migrate to Bitcoin fee rate, and remove extra taproot fields from it. Finalize PSBT. Nunchuk-desktop version 1.9.32 and 30. Trezor Safe 3 support, new onboarding flow for first-time users, new create hot wallet feature to quickly create a hot wallet for immediate use. That's been me asking Hugo for a while. Nunchuk-android version 1.9.44 adds support for barbecue QR, add a display setting to use large fonts for balance, and a few other updates. Liana version 5.0, Vineroot, daemon library, add experimental support for Taproot, configuration with Bitcoin D, GUI, add support for Coldcard at time of writing miniscript support. It's USB, but I think I've convinced Kevin to go air gap. Possibly to create a Taproot descriptor in the installer, add sweep functionality. Whoa, a bunch of other updates. Krux beta 24, highly experimental. BIP85, change accounts derivation, new wallet login and customizations, high mnemonic security settings, cube screen optimizations. So this is one of my new FOSS DIY hardware wallet projects. I love this thing. So these guys are playing at a proper different level. They are doing a lot of the embedded work. I think there's a RISC-V version of this as well. It's for ESP32 Express if hardware. So that's the target hardware that they develop for. They encrypt seeds properly inside. This is all, again, this is very beta. This is very experimental. All the warnings, don't YOLO your life savings on it. But these guys are going really in a good direction. They have really nice UX. They support this Amigo UI hardware stuff that there is for ESP32. So you can actually do touch. There's a nice little touch screen for it. Again, more warnings. Have you choose that? But again, very cool. And these guys are doing a lot of work on this stuff. There's a huge community. They are based, I think a lot of the maintainers are based out of Brazil. They have a very active Telegram group, and it's very nice to see. Like, very nice security practices as well. I think this project has some huge potential because it's also based on ESP32. It can be really cheap. And, in RISC-V, I mean, if you like open source, the only true open source shit you can find in hardware at lower level is RISC-V stuff. So it gets really down there. It's very nice. Have you guys played with this thing yet?
I have only played with the Android version, but still, it's a nice little app. Yeah, I think that they are making some cool some cool features on top of it.
All right, Blockstream Green Android version 4.0.27. Add push notifications, Lightning, bump Breez to version 0.3.8. A bunch of updates and Qt updates as well. I assume Qt might be for desktop. Blue Wallet version 6.6.0. Save file button. Allow amount and memo have hold to copy and re-enable biometrics to unlock. Brainbow version 0.1.151. Change wallet onboarding order, fix wrong label display, updated Electrum server presets. Bitcoin Keeper version 1.2.1. Now hide or delete keys and wallets. Support for Taproot wallets. Fee Insight. Bisq version 2.0.2. Citadel version 0.3.5. Labelbase. Pi Labelbase, I assume that's their library. Version 0.0.1 released the official Python API for the wrapper. Labelbase is interesting. Again, privacy warning. But you can sync your BIP 329, right, Craig?
Yeah.
Labels.
Yeah, so he knows, the developer, Xavier knows
Yeah.
that there's obviously a security issue. He's built this from the ground up to encrypt everything, encrypted at rest,
Yes.
on fly, all of those sort of things. But he also knows that, ultimately people are not necessarily going to want to use the centralized server that he provides. So focused, I think, recently, and I think just has released in a way to run Labelbase using Docker. So you can now run it yourself. You can have a single point on your server where all of your labels go, and your different, if the wallets support this, then you should be able to sync your labels between all of your different wallets. So I think it's a very cool idea. Yeah, I'm looking forward to working more with it.
I feel like the label stuff could really take advantage of the SimpleX protocol. Because then you could use a third-party server. The worst thing that could happen to you there is maybe just leak your IP to them, but then you can just use Tor, and it's all designed for that. You could use SimpleX to do all the syncing of labels between devices, between everything else, right? I mean, and you have forward privacy. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, if you have SimpleX with all the features turned on, it's pretty impressive. They really went above and beyond what you need for privacy. So I was just thinking, sort of inventing some protocol or some transport for the labels. Maybe SimpleX could be the thing that does it. I'd love to see it.
So this is a bit of a tangent, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on SimpleX versus Nostr as a messaging platform. Like, what are the strengths and weaknesses?
Oh yeah. So Nostr should not be used for DMs. It's just tragically horrific, because Nostr makes all the correct trade-offs for public messages not to be censored, right? So they're just essentially like signed envelopes, right? They're public to be relayed, right? And when you try to do that with a encrypted message as opposed to signed message, right? That message is still being transported publicly, right? So you have major privacy concerns there. And the worst part is users have grown to expect forward privacy. What does that mean? It means that if you lose your keys to your, I don't know, Telegram or something, right? Your messages that were the private type, right? They're no longer visible because they're device specific, and and so essentially they're using ephemeral keys, right? Normally double ratchet kind of algo. And with Nostr, these DMs are not. They could be stored by anyone, and if you lose your private keys, all your Nostr DMs are now available to that person to read. Terrible. Because, again, the protocol was designed for public messaging, right? So, I mean, I've been, again, autistically screaming about Omimo, which is a great XMTP spec. It was designed for XMTP, but it could be ported for this. A great spec for double ratchet algo, like a double ratchet solution, right? So that you can have encrypted messages with forward privacy. And I think that we can just sort of instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, we could just have client-based ephemeral keys for Nostr DMs. If you lose your phone, you can't see probably the keys anymore. There is fancy ways of syncing things, but even on the simpler level, you don't care if you can't see a DM anymore, as much as you care that nobody can see the DM later. It's all about the very trade-offs here. So anyway, I initially thought, hey, like maybe if Evgeny and Fia Jaff can go have a dinner, and I figure out how we can use maybe SimpleX as the solution for Nostr DMs. But SimpleX is just way too far out there in terms of completeness and sort of complexity for DMing. So I think like a more simple double ratchet on the DMs, device-based, ephemeral key-based would just do the trick. This is what we used to use on Adium to have private DMs on IRC. It was a double ratchet algo like that, and it works beautifully. It used to be called OTR, off the record. Perfect name for it. I don't know why they changed to a memo. But anyways, so those are my thoughts.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's good to kind of understand that Nostr, at least today, is not good for DMs. I see people, talking about it for private stuff like, sharing PSPTs or whatever. And I didn't have as thorough an answer as you, but I have been aware that it's not the right network to choose, at least today.
I think we could, if we just have a double envelope, we can already start using for some things, right? Like there will be some trade-offs, of course, right? That you could leak the like where the message came from, but it's more like akin to like how core works. There's no certainty that really who was the originator IP of that message, right? On Nostr, which is nice.
We have is it Paul? Paul, aren't you guys using Nostr for eCash related stuff?
Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot right here, but maybe you want to explain your Yeah,
we have Nostr DMs in Mutiny, and that's how we're doing payment requests. So that kind of like I send you an invoice, and on your Mutiny wallet that shows up as like a request from me for payment. I agree with everything MVK said about the problems with Nostr DMs. It's definitely the most convenient at hand thing to get this going. So I'm looking forward to like basically if the Nostr community can like either pick something that they really like, or if something like SimpleX, shows up that is actually like other people have integrated it and it's working well. Like I've used the SimpleX app and had like so much pain and suffering.
It's very much painful.
So I want a good solution. And, with these encrypted chat apps, usually the pain and suffering is solved by some level of centralization.
Yep.
And so Nostr usually ends up being that good way of, okay, what parts are typically centralized? Let's do that in some kind of fun Nostr way, and then, do the rest of it the right way. So that's kind of my hope. But for now, yeah, we are definitely making this trade-off of using Nostr DMs.
The most important caveat here is that it's early, very early, right? There is no normies on Nostr, and there is no normies on Mutiny. No, but really, like, there may be a couple handful.
Yeah.
But my point is, like, you guys are focusing on creating a payment solution, right? Like, not focusing on how to, like, best and most privately hand out that invoice. Like, hopefully you find better carriers eventually. And the Nostr side is the opposite too, right? Like, it's like, how do you better create, say, like a public sign messaging, like without censorship, right? Not how do you send like lightning invoices over DM with privacy. So, it's just, you just happen to be leveraging each other right now because you're bootstrapping two networks at the same time. But like, it doesn't mean this is the future of it. Like, I don't take issue with like my cashew token being one day maybe seen if my key leaks on Nostr, right? Like, because I'm early on it and I understand its limitations. It's not like we're forcing like plebes, like who just learn about social media, not even plebes, sorry. The plebes will be like Bitcoiners, but like more like a total, like, the proverbial grandma, right? That's just sending like her credit card number over a DM on Nostr, right? Like, it's a very different target market, target audience now that I don't think is as at risk as a normie sort of taking that for their life savings.
Yes, please do not send your life savings over Nostr DMs using Mutiny.
Very important disclosure.
And it's important to remember, it doesn't matter if you're a normie or not, that being Having some dank memes on your hard drive does not save you from the vulnerabilities.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, listen, we got to start somewhere, right? Like,
Yeah.
as long as like we are aiming for better, not just settling for what's cozy and works. I think we're doing it right.
And it's the opposite trade-off set of like what we've been conditioned to use in current world, which is basically the extraction is delivered via carrot, and the carrot is convenience.
Yes.
Right. So right now we've got the convenience carrot sitting in front of us that enables enormous bad behavior. So there's no convenience to any of this other stuff. And so, the incentives are reasonably right side up, because we're not basically making a security or privacy in exchange for convenience trade-off. We're both not secure and private, and we're also not convenient. So I feel reasonably confident that the sorry state of affairs is the point.
Yes. It's very similar to like, when people talk about Bitcoin not being perfect and all that shit, right? It's like, the world is like this like dystopian shithole direction, right? and then like wealth distribution in the world right now is like, like maybe 100th of a basis point, right? Like owns 50% of the whole world's wealth through like middlemaning and sort of like cantillionaire effect, right? Like Bitcoin is not going to fix like lazy people. It's not going to fix like people who like don't have a lot to contribute, but you just have a fair protocol, right? Where maybe we improve wealth distribution to 1%. That's 1 million X, improvement in humanity, right? Like we're not going to get to like, to fix like, it's not perfect, right? Like what we're trying to do is have a leap.
And I actually don't care about fixing that. I care about the barriers that stand in the way of fixing that.
Yes.
Right. I'm not outcome oriented whatsoever in the clown world. I'm really just interested in people having, a fair shot at mobility within this environment. And right now there's unfair mobility within the environment, and that's by design. And so if all Bitcoin does is fix the barrier to mobility problem, then we already won. I don't care who has what.
We already are winning. Ooh, look at that. What happened to my camera?
2 thumbs up gives you fireworks.
Wow. I've never seen this before. That's hilarious.
Yeah. The 1 thumb up gives you the thumbs up usually. Now, yeah, the AI vision has come for all of us.
Jesus Christ. And I didn't even... non-consensual AI on my camera right now.
but we also have, there's no historical precedence for fair distribution, or maybe I shouldn't say that, for equal distribution, right? Equal distribution was never an economic ideal. It actually probably delivers a significantly poorer outcome to more people if you had equal distribution.
There is no equal distribution on nature.
Exactly. Unfair distribution delivers a higher species level outcome for whoever is participating in it, because it means there is a fitness test for what you're doing.
Yes.
And if there's not a fitness test for your behavior, then you don't get to improve.
So what you're saying is that communists are going to have a hard time under a Bitcoin standard. Yes. Wait.
We're going to short the commies. Short the commies.
We're short commies.
We're short commies here.
I do really like this meta discussion. This is something I'm thinking about all the time, because it is like I'm trying to bring cypherpunk, like how we're using. I was DMing people on Nostr using invoices, and I just wanted that UX to be better and to be in Mutiny, even though it's not the perfect thing. But I'm definitely starting to delineate between like selling someone a chainsaw and selling someone like a pet dog. Like a chainsaw can be used wrong, but it doesn't have, you can't like kill it because you forgot to feed it, like you can destroy it, but that's not a moral act. There are things that some Bitcoin tools you're taking on a responsibility, like a pet dog.
Well, there is a term in war and policing and things like that. It's called the the duty of care.
Mm.
I think it's something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
And what he means is that, like, even if it's a human or pet or an animal, whatever, like once you take custody of something like that is alive, right? Ideally a human in this case, you have a duty of care. Like, they are now your responsibility, right? Because you essentially are imprisoning them, right? Your children are in your prison, right? Like, they are yours, so you have responsibility of care towards them, right? Once they're no longer your responsibility, it's not your duty of care, right? And society expands that by saying, hey, you know what, like, not the Elizabeth Warren version of social contract, more like a human social contract of like, listen, you know, I care about my neighbor, right? Like, and this has been translated into religion or you know, all kinds of like cults and things. But like, it's just this idea that, like, you know, if you don't do that, it's immoral, right? Like, the morality comes from this care.
And there's also a huge economic explanation for this as well, which is that, you know, I like the chainsaw versus dog analogy, which is, you know, like there's I forget which economist did this, but he basically said, you know, there's a coffee cup. There's only two outcomes for the coffee cup. It remains unbroken or it breaks. That is the entire life cycle of the coffee cup, is it continues to remain unbroken or you drop it and it breaks.
But what if you piss in it?
Well, then you may have ruined it for the next user, but it's not broken. Then it's just a piss cup.
No, it's a nice test.
When you enter into a more complex social contract, which is the duty of care, you actually enter into an unbounded outcome set, because you have another sort of inexplicably chaotic and complex set of outcomes that happen between you and the entity that you have the duty of care to. So money is like, you know, like fire meets every metric for what a living thing is. Basically, money is the economic equivalent of the duty of care, because it is a sort of unbounded potential energy for the future.
Freedom credits. You know, this is what I try, like, because there's a lot of kids, especially in Bitcoin, they're very confused about, like, you know, like
many things.
Yeah, many things, but like more like confused. Like, there's this confusion, especially for young people. It's normal to like be confused about fairness and making more money, and sort of like, oh, if you're rich, you're a horrible person, or like distribution of what, like, these things are kind of confusing in a way, right? And it's important to understand like why money is important without talking about Lamborghinis, right? And it sounds simple to you, who's an older person who's lived a little bit of your life, right? And understand that like having economic capacity to fix your roof when, you know, there's a problem, and it's not a cheap thing, right? You have to have what a kid would consider like rich people money in order to replace a part of your house, right? So like having this economic capacity, it's like, it's freedom credits, right? Like, you have now the freedom of remaining that place because you were able to fix it, right? You were not forced to move out because it rains inside, right? Like, you were free to take a flight and move. You're free to, like, you know, eat. And like, that's what like a lot of people don't understand. It's like, just economic capacity is like freedom. So like, the more you can amass, the more freedom you're going to get. That's why like billionaires can do whatever the fuck they want. You know, like.
But there's a degree of separation thing that you're describing that Bitcoiners understand perfectly, which is, up until some concentric circle around me, my economic responsibility is direct, right? There's a spending directive that is imperative upon me. And everybody chooses sort of where that concentric circle ends and where the territory, you know, the external territory begins. And what we really have a responsibility around is to have spend responsibility up to the line, and then system design responsibility beyond the line. And so, you know, when you get like, we'll bag on Elizabeth Warren because she makes it fucking easy. She wants to control how many Doritos are in the bag, right? That's not system design responsibility. That's spend responsibility. She thinks that her concentric circle doesn't end. And what we as Bitcoiners understand is that my job is to accumulate wealth within my circle and deploy that wealth to increase prosperity and freedom within the circle. Outside of the circle, everybody else needs to have maximal ability to build their own circle.
Well, this goes back to the eternal argument, like that even libertarians have with themselves, right? Like the externality problem, and and how do you negotiate all this? I think that the main things that Bitcoiners get that libertarians don't get is like how to actually live it, not LARP it, and understand it's messy. There is no answer. Like all these range questions have no answers, right? Like it's different for everyone, and like how much people think that their externality is their problem, right?
It's Econ 101. We all have a utility curve, right?
That's right.
Everybody has a utility curve where they make decisions, and the amalgamation of our utility curves creates a utility wave. And so the emergent property of our collective utility curves is the world we live in.
Okay, I'm gonna then end this one here with this, unless somebody has another point here that's very important to get in, with this wonderful feedback I got on Unleashed.chat. Okay, this app is advertised as free and open source, but I was prompted for payment a few questions in, and I'll leave it at that. So, Boltz-web-app. Version 1.3.2, prevent refunding to lock up addresses, fix NPM, and a bunch of stuff. AgoraDesk version 1.1.31, add local currency to the wallet balance. All right, Project Spotlight. Wizard Sardines, which is Wizardines, Twin Poinsot announced proof of concept to set up Ledger device without Ledger Live. That's nice. So I believe Trezor and Ledger require their phone home systems in order to attest the device and set it up.
That's not actually true with Trezor. As far as I know, the Trezor command line CTL, Trezor CDL.
Okay, so we need the command line.
Yeah, you do, but you will for this project as well.
Yes,
as it stands today. But yeah, I just wanted to please go on.
Yeah, no. So like absolutely. Sorry, but what I meant is like for a normal user, they have to connect to the desktop or phone app, right, before they can actually use the hardware wallet. And I thought Trezor didn't need that before, but then it sort of brought to my attention that it does. Maybe they changed that like later on. I understand why they all do that. It's a lot easier to deal with normie users that might have bought a fake device on Amazon, but it does come with issues too. If you do that kind of attestation, you put the factory at risk because now the factory is the single point of failure in that scenario. You can have a state actor coerce you to authenticate a wallet that is not necessarily good. But it's nice that people can now, or they should call this the Free the Ledger CLI or something like that, right? All right. Cypher.Space, a platform for building Bitcoin-focused web projects. I don't know this one much. Spend sats, discover where you can pay with Bitcoin. Unleashed.chat version 0.1.2. You can now search your feed. You can sort of ask what's happening today on my feed. And you get something, and you can copy cold blocks now. The pricing and sats still the same. Project Spotlight, Hush Line, pre-launch of lightweight, secure, and anonymous tip line. I don't know what this is. Free and open source anonymous tip line as a service for organizations and individuals. Is it like a Dropbox kind of thing?
Yeah, what's the thing journalists use, like Secure Drop or something?
Yeah, Secure Drop, I think it was. Anyways, Lightning plus L2 plus CLN version 24.02.2. Actually, sorry guys, any other Bitcoin software updates that we might have missed that you guys have? Nope. Right, so CLN updated. Phoenix D version 0.1.3 released. Breez SDK released. Mutiny node, please.
Yeah, so we have some breaking news. We just shipped Lightning address.
Nice.
Yeah, it's the tweet just went out. I was like reviewing some stuff during the show. Sorry.
That's funny.
Yeah, so it's kind of almost silly. engineering effort that went into this, but we think we did Lightning address the best. So basically, right now, Mutiny Plus users can reserve get their own Lightning address. Like, I have future Paul at mutiny.plus. And so that kind of closes the loop of this whole social payment stuff that we've been working on. So you can, people can just zap you and it shows up in your wallet, which is very nice. But the way it works is it uses a federation. Cody from the Fediment project did this thing called Hermes. It basically, the federation receives these payments to your Lightning address on your behalf. And then when you come on, and they're locked to your pub key, and when you come online, you sweep them from the federation.
Yeah. So like, just for people to understand what's going on here, on eCash, there's essentially 3 kinds of token signature combinations. One of them is you create a token and then, the other person redeems that token. The other time there's pay to key plus the DLK, right? So you can essentially combine the two. So you can create a token that is assigned to a receiver. What's cool about that is you can redeem this offline. You don't need a mint to trust that token because it's assigned to you. It's very powerful.
Well, you can't redeem a token offline, but you can receive it offline.
Yes.
And asynchronously.
Yeah, you can trust it offline without checking the mint because it could only have been assigned to you.
Yeah.
So I could create the equivalent of a $1 bill that is assigned to Craig, give you offline. You don't have to trust me or check it online. It's real. All you have to do is check the signature, right? That is a real token.
This is a huge, long-standing fundamental problem of Lightning.
Yes.
Is the liveness requirement. To make a Lightning payment, both nodes need to be online, talking to each other, because there's a bunch of back and forth to verify a Lightning payment, to reveal pre-image and stuff like that. The fact that eCash is bearer tokens just makes so many more things possible. I'm still, hopeful that, async Lightning payments, which kind of use LSPs to get around some of this, which is, in some sense, it's kind of similar conceptually to how this works. I'm hopeful that will happen, but for now, I think this is one of the best ways to get offline payments for Lightning, because at the end of the day, when you log back in, it shows up as Lightning for you.
I think it's ginormous. Like the pay to key eCash type of token is a ginormous leap that is you will be appreciated in within a year or two, but it solves a lot of problems. The thing that sucks is that you have to know who you're sending it to. You can't just put out a token out there for anyone. That one could be inflated, could be whatever. It could have been already melted. You don't know.
Which is the cool thing that Nostr gives us is people are building identities that have a pub key. And so you can do things if you assuming that identity is not compromised and you pick the right one, which is not a trivial assumption. And I think there's more work we need to do to make sure that's good. But assuming that, you now have a pub key to encrypt things too. And that's just so powerful, where I can't encrypt something to your Twitter handle.
Yeah, no, it's, this is the beauty of public private key cryptography, right? You don't need permission to encrypt something to somebody else. It's what was the word? It's a non-consensual receive. Bitcoin is non-consensual receive.
Yeah.
No, you cannot prevent somebody from giving you money if they know your address, which is a hash of your public key. But it's quite it's very powerful. Sorry. So any other updates there that we should did you want to mention?
Yeah, we just, we had this big social redesign launch. So we did a lot of little, fixing some paper cuts from that, because that was a big overhaul. But the main thing is, get Mutiny Plus. And even if you're on iOS, you can just go to mutiny.plus and there's a website to pay for Mutiny Plus, and then get a Lightning address and let us know how it works. And eventually we'll have free randomized addresses for poor people. But for now, we wanted to, reward people who have actually, been supporting the project monetarily.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I wanted to ask you, Paul, are the Discover Federations feature, is that filtered at all, or like is there any, like, could someone put up, because I see that you have a recommended by feature there, but I guess unfortunately, like, you can't, like, you see the profile pictures of the Nostr user that's recommended the Federation, but you can't actually, you don't know who that is unless he's actually in your contact list, or you know that profile picture.
Yeah, I think right now it might only show you contacts that are in your contact list. And we're also using Primal's like list of real people type thing as additional refinement, so it's not just totally randoms. But I think that's good feedback. I definitely want to make that a better like web of trusty thing. So like, hey, let's dig into, like what's the Nostr pub key of the mint itself. What has the mint revealed about the Guardians, if anything? And then, who has recommended it? Like, when did they recommend it? Do you have a bunch of mutual follows with them? Like those kind of web of trust things, I think is definitely worth fleshing out. I think this is very like MVP, like here are some mints. They are recommended by some people. Like some of the mints don't
put the life savings in.
Put your life. Do it. Just come on.
It's like, no, don't do it. It's a joke. It's a joke. Back away from your keyboard.
Secure your utility wave or something, whatever Harry was talking about. Yeah, so it's very MVP, but I definitely want to like build out these web of trust type things so that you can kind of do your own research in a legitimate way, that you're like, hey, I'm going to audit this mint and see who's trusted it. And just as another fun caveat, like just because someone recommends it, a bunch of people could recommend it, but that might be a relatively low signal thing if they don't know. It's like, hey, I used this for a week and I've sent and received 10,000 sats on it. So, good, looks good to me.
We have a technique internally. Sometimes like people will sort of like be yelling about like an advanced feature they want on things we make.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make the feature, but we'll leave a small little bug that makes the feature unusable. And we just wait to see how long it's going to take for the first person. Like some things, it took a year. So that means like people request things, but they don't actually use it. It's kind of fascinating. It's a lot of fun, by the way, to do that. Highly recommended. Very satisfying.
I think that's the thing. That is one of those interesting things is like the best UX is just to put someone in a federation right now. You can't get lightning address if you don't have a federation,
Right.
Having a list is kind of asking them to do something. Having like a whole bunch of information so you can audit is asking them to do a lot more. And it's very unlikely that anybody's going to do that. So this is totally, boomeranging back to that last conversation, but like we have to find ways of allowing people who want to take some more responsibility to be able to be more responsible, while also like trying to have like really good sane defaults, because people are just going to YOLO click the first thing they see, and we hope that first thing is good and not just some random honeypot federation.
I think like market sort of like recognition and demand sort of like resolve these problems too. As the demand grows, like the amount of pain and suffering and also like a distinction starts to happen, right? So like people and projects and groups start to distinct themselves a bit better, and then just naturally aligns, right? Like, there's brands you trust more, right? Like it's very easy for these things to align once there's a little bit more amounts of people sort of like reviewing or getting rugged by things.
For sure.
Does it create, that's interesting, because does it actually create like a liability for you if you actually put in a specific federation as default?
I think if we put a default federation, we would probably at least want to be one of the members, right?
Yeah.
And so if we were one of the members of the federation, there would still be a liability in the sense that like, or there would still be a risk in the sense that like, if it's a 3 of 4 or 3 of 5 or whatever.
You know how you fix this, right? dev random picks the federation that is default for every person that opens the app new. I wash my hands.
No, I don't want to wash. That's the thing, is I don't think we can, like, I mean, this recommendation list is in some sense us washing our hands. But if we had like a default out of the gate, like Blue Sky, right? Blue Sky lets you choose your whatever Blue Sky server federated, whatever it is, but it has the default one run by Blue Sky pre-selected,
and nobody changes.
Yeah, and most people don't change that. I changed it. So yeah, if we had a default selected one, I would hope that we're like a member of that federation. Again, that's just another maturity thing of more people seeing these federations, seeing the value add of being, a guardian in the federation. Most people just kind of want federations to exist, including us. It's easier if the great federations just exist, and then you can get all these nice benefits of, now I don't have to run a self-custodial wallet. I can put my users on this thing instead. But I think to get those to exist, I think we bootstrap it by starting federations.
There is no reason, right, why on Fedimint you can't have a federation that has like 100 signers, right? So
yeah, that would really suck for latency.
Okay.
That would be, the consensus rounds grow in time the more members there are.
Okay.
So that is the big limitation. And then also the time required for a consensus round is also limits the ultimate throughput of transactions per second.
All right. We'll talk about Fedimint. Fedimint version 0.3.0. Dynamic meta fields through the meta module and a bunch of other things. If you guys want to comment. I am not super knowledgeable about Fedimint.
We are using the meta fields for the information. So there's the spec that Ben made for publishing about your federation to Nostr, and then when you connect to Fedimint, it gives you meta information about it that could also, I believe that's how it refers to that Nostr event. So both things are important. If you're making a mint right now, pay attention, get a pretty icon, have a good description, maybe explain the trustworthiness or something. Use the meta information, basically.
Okay. All right. Zeus version 0.8.3-RC1 pre-release. LND on-chain TX control, custom pictures for saved nodes, and a bunch of other little things. And they're also adding BBQR. I think the next version should have it. They have a toggle for you to pick what kind of QR you want to use, and there's more experimentation happening. Power to Evan. Project Spotlight, LNcast, Lightning Address Broadcasting app. Don't know much about this. Do you guys?
Sounds like a bad idea. I actually remember something similar. I don't know if it was them, but I remember some people complaining at one point on Twitter. I don't know if it was like a couple of months ago or something, where indeed they were effectively getting spammed with some kind of like broadcasted messages. Yeah, I'm not sure what's the goal here.
It does seem likely that minimum payments will be a functionality that will be required at some point.
Well, I mean, remember when different Paul wrote Sphinx, right? I mean, it became to bog down, right? It's a very difficult thing to scale. I personally prefer my identity, my value transfer, and my messaging to be all in separate protocols that have interfaces between them. One thing that I don't like is people using, for example, their Nostr ID to log into everything, but I understand why people do it. Maybe when we have rolling keys and things. Anyways, I just feel like people defer the losing of the keys always for later. First they build the house, and then they go check that the foundation is, But yeah, that's just, it's part of learning. We're all designing new things. All right, software releases and project updates on Nostr. NDK version 2.7.0. Pablo told me that it's a lot faster now because it's 2.7 inches bigger. That is a joke. And he made it, not me. I figured I'd bring a little Pablo into the conversation.
I don't make the rules. I just enforce them.
That's right. I'm just the consensus protocol here. Brainbow, iOS version 1.4.7, smooth onboarding, profile screen facelift, fin rendering, Android version 0.96.10, smooth onboarding, profile screen facelifts, and a bunch of other things. Amethyst version 0.8.6, sorry, 0.86.0. Features draft. Oh, so this draft feeds, there is a new nip so that you can sync your drafts between clients too. It's really cool. Unfortunately, I think he uses essentially gift wrapped or private DMs, which be careful what you put in your drafts. It really reminds me, like, this must have been 20 plus years ago. Okay. It was around 9/11 time. I think it was the FBI figured out that the way terrorists were getting around their messages being read by Google or other sort of email providers was, maybe it had been Hotmail at the time. They were saving the messaging, they were saving in the drafts, and they were sharing the passwords of the accounts. So the emails are never being sent. Quite clever. So, think about it that way, right? So like you once you're syncing things and sending things and whatever, like there's always a risk. So govern yourself accordingly. But it's very cool. Syncing drafts, being able the fungibility of your identity on Nostr between clients is just remarkable. It's just like Bitcoin. You take your seed, you go to a new wallet, don't like NVK anymore, you can just move to a new one. It's great. Same with Nostr, right? You can just move from whatever client you want, and that's a huge improvement from what we had before. Mostro version 0.11.0, adding voice with LN address instead of Bolt11, and a few more things. Project Spotlight, Nostr Sync provide a broadcast and export service enabling users to download a copy of their data. That's nice. Nostr Signer, a simple Nostr signing app. X to Nostr by Nostr Band, a simple UI to cross-post. Cross-posting, I'm not sure how I feel about it. Kind of feel like that's how communities that are new die. It's because like everybody just has a bot running that mirrors things. All right. Any other updates on Nostr that you guys want to bring up before I move to the next section?
I just use it more.
All right. You use more?
I just use it more. I'm just reading more on it than I was before.
Yeah. Twitter is getting, I think is a function of the feed algo as well, of course. But
yeah,
there is a certain like angriness to it, like a certain sort of like, it's like it indexes for people to be like grumpy at each other. Even friends get grumpy at each other on Twitter. It's like, I don't know. It's just like, and it wasn't like that, even though it's the same system. It just feels angrier, and you notice because the Bitcoiners are winning. The price is at $70,000 per Bitcoin. I mean, seriously, just think about that for a second, right? 70,000 bucks per coin. Moon was $1,000, by the way, for the people that weren't around. Okay, like Moon meme was Bitcoin is gonna get to 1,000.
We did it, Joe.
Yeah, I know, right? And people are so fucking angry. But and it's not just like, sometimes the humor doesn't translate or sarcasm, whatever. No, it's just actually angry. So anyways, I blame the algo.
It's because the price is high, right? The cure for higher prices is higher prices, as long discussed. But but this is the we're scared. Right? I think Bitcoiners are just scared that they're winning and that anything might break the winning.
Really? I don't know, man.
There's also, I don't get the vibe that people are scared as much as someone who's built their entire personality around being contrarian.
Yeah.
That's true.
Struggles to win because what am I supposed to be contrarian against now?
Yeah.
If everybody was just using Bitcoin, what would my personality be? I'd have to change my dating profile,
But I just I can't ignore, because it affects the productive people, because the productive people, they rely on the social signals to, what to develop, what features to make. And when it gets too grumpy and too noisy and too low quality, they don't participate. I mean, like, Craig is a great example. He's not on Twitter most of the time. So he might be missing cues on where to go, right? Like, we rely on people, bitching about it. Bitching about an app is one of the best sources, right? Because that's real. It's like real pain.
Yeah.
It's not feature requests. Feature requests are low, very low quality, because that's what people want to know, what people need.
Yeah, low difficulty adjustment.
Yeah, and on Nostr, on the other hand, like, it's like, kumbaya feeling, and, of course, smaller community is easier and it's less grumpy. But anyways, it's just, I can't shake off this grumpiness that Twitter has right now.
I just, when I'm on Twitter, I feel nudged. I feel the nudging towards.
It's a mosh pit, but in a bad way.
Yeah.
Mosh pits are supposed to be fun. Like, if you had a brief moment as a punk as a kid and you went to mosh pits, sure, you might lose a tooth, but it was a lot of fun. Like, you come out and you hug after, like, you have some drinks, great time.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you might be headbutting your best friend. I have this wonderful, massive scar here of one of those moments. But, like, and it doesn't feel that way. Like, it just feels like angry in a non-fun way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it feels to me like a lot of people feel like they're playing zero-sum game. Like there is only one technology that will win, and if it's not mine, then basically it's a really bad situation for me. It really does feel that way. I understand why we've come to that place, particularly when you talk about what is the next soft fork. We all understand that,
that is a zero-sum game when it comes to Bitcoin consensus. Yes.
But it's actually not, right? I mean, it is possible that we can talk about more than one soft fork, and we can actually build on more than one soft fork. It is certainly possible, but it doesn't seem to be the way that people are taking it. They are very much like, it's either I get the soft fork that all my stuff depends on in, all of that work is just basically going down the toilet. Like there are only two ways that this thing can go. And that, for me, is the basis for quite a lot of the angriness that you see, because as soon as somebody says anything that is not leading to that outcome, it must therefore by default lead to the other outcome. In other words, all of my work is now not for any use. That, for me, is at least part of it. This kind of vibe that we have.
You have the meme with the two girls fighting over their soft fork, and then the dude on the sideline, the ossification guy. just enjoy. I feel like there's a part of why it feels zero sum is like the ossification narrative keeps growing. So each soft fork feels like, oh, this might be our last one, even though it's kind of, I don't think that's a really right way to think about it.
It's like lack of patience, and I think there is a lack of technicality now in the Twitter discussions that like are part of the problem.
Didn't used to be there.
There's a lot of people who feel like they understand, but like they're so far from understanding what the technical sort of like concerns on a tweet are. I mean, like, I'm guilty. Like, I'll make a tweet like, shitting on some platform or something, right? Like, it's about hardware. I mean, I wake up and that's all I do, right? Like, I mean, I'm embedded in the embedded like hardware business forever, and that's all I think about. So I just assume that like my short tweet shitting on Raspberry Pi, the context is going to be gotten, right? Because the people who are arguing against it will probably understand, because these are things that they think about. And I forget it's not true. And I think like what happened is before there was more spectators versus the people who work on the things, and the people who work on the things would like have this like fights on Twitter, but it was actually like good,
substantive.
Like it sometimes was amicable, sometimes it wasn't, but it was like the people who work on the projects, like, and have some technical understanding, like fighting it out and sort of like playing it out in public, and it was actually very educational, right? But I think now it's like there's a bit of like, it's like a team sport. It's the supporters of each project fighting with each other, which is the completely useless part of the argument. Like, it's not constructive.
The problem is the UASF happened, and it gave everyone the impression that they were a part of consensus and they had to chime in on every possible change to Bitcoin, regardless of the fact that they might not be, aligned or informed from an engineering perspective or whatever. The UASF gave everyone this impression that you had to sort of like every individual had their say in Bitcoin, in changes to Bitcoin software, basically.
There's a second problem. Alex, I agree. The second problem is what I call the layer 2 lab problem, which is don't raise money on a pending Bitcoin change. If you raise venture money and that venture money is supposed to fund a project that requires a change to Bitcoin, you're going to have a bad time. But apparently, we're all going to have a bad time.
Wait.
You're in my world now, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm going to bitch about Bitcoin not being changed because my business depend on it, right? It's like, it's kind of like the zero confirmation people. It's like,
it's so fucking stupid.
Really? Like, are we really arguing about this after 15 years again? Like, Jesus. Like,
this is why I run a mining business, because I literally require no change. And I don't want to require anything of Bitcoin other than it to function exactly the way it does today. I don't have an opinion on ossification. I have an opinion on producing the next block.
So I feel like there's a kind of interesting paradox here, because I totally agree that it's dumb to raise VC funds based on a prospective soft fork, right? But I also feel like one of the best possible ways to evaluate a soft fork would be having lots of working software that we could run on testnets and signets and play around with it and get a really good vibe of, did this soft fork make it much easier to deliver better Bitcoin experiences?
Signal demand.
But how do you fund that test software?
This is unsolvable, guys. This is going to be the dynamic of Bitcoin forever.
We're supposed to have fun staying poor until the soft fork happens, and then you're allowed to not be poor.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
It sounds like whoever can risk capital without ostracizing everybody by being an asshole about their soft fork has like the best chance here. Or just poor people who write open source code.
That's why Bitcoin funds development is because number go up is, again, the solution to the soft fork problem. Because the more Bitcoin goes up, the more bandwidth developers have to take more financial risk.
I feel like everybody starts like that, and then they rage quit or they rage on people, right? It's like, Paul has been like pushing for drive chain, like God knows how long now, like 6-7 years more.
Different Paul.
And he was very polite about it. He would literally make you die of listening for 5 hours, Paul Stark. But then, like, he essentially got to a point, is like, he's like either rage quitting or fundraising and trying to push for his, like, Bitcoiners forget that, like, there's still politics, and it is full politics because it's like humans who rule the consensus of Bitcoin, right? I mean, like, we're governed by math, but like that math still depends on proof of work, and proof of work is money. So like there is politics, right? I mean, UASF was politics and stuff. And I think like maybe like all the people don't want to be relevant. There's a lot of main character syndrome, like it's like people feel like they can affect change directly. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's just growing pains too, right? I mean,
you're seeing a lot of that right now with the MEV conversation. We used to talk about MEV, considering perhaps the risk of like changes to Bitcoin that could introduce MEV.
Yes.
But I think now you have an industry really that's fermenting around MEV, and they are having this conversation. I mean, they're like, I like to say that they're teaching the controversy in the sense that they're trying to make this debate about whether or not there are risks to Bitcoin with regards to MEV. But what they actually want is for MEV to happen because they want a share of that pie. They would very much like applications or layers to be built on Bitcoin that generate MEV revenue because they realize the amount of revenues and business opportunity that this has created in Ethereum and other chains. And they want a stake in all of this.
Literally a stake.
Yeah.
No, but see, this is the thing, right? Like, it's okay. Like, I mean, it's fair. It's fair for people to want things, right? Like, I mean, our economic incentive, right, is to keep our already made Bitcoin, right, secure, because we want number go up, right? And we want the safety and the uncensorable way in which it works for us to be able to spend it, right? But it's very understandable that there is other sort of like interest groups, right, that want to accumulate in a different way because their time preference is different, right? They want to accumulate maybe buy Lambos, whatever. But the point is, like, in politics, it's always going to be a tug of war between different incentives, right? And it doesn't make one incentive wrong and another one right. It's just you just have a different perspective, a different bag, right, to defend. And I think like this whole sort of like creating this dynamic of like evil and justice or like, like it's so reductionist, it's so dumb. Like, the world is not like that, right? Like, I mean, things are very gray. Like there's no saints. There is nobody is without fault. And maybe like the sanctification of everything, including Satoshi, is really fucking annoying.
Yeah, but I'll take the other side. Which is that like there is ultimately a hierarchy of trade-offs. The misrepresentation of one trade-off set for another is wrong. And so to me, like the lionizing of the individual is where I agree.
Right. I mean, like, but there is ethical ways of doing things. There is moral ways of doing things, right? But that doesn't mean that like, like you immediately win just because you're moral. I mean, we all know this, right? Because, we could have all made 1,000 times more money if we just made some shitcoin.
True.
But the point is that the system, the math in Bitcoin doesn't give a flying fuck, right? So like it does tend to index towards conservatism and towards this sort of like a more low time preference way of being, because that's how the system was kind of designed, right? But it doesn't mean it can't change, and it doesn't mean like that the ethics always wins, right? Like, so it's just so you can't disregard just because you find them to be evil.
No, I think where I run into trouble with these arguments is not the ad hominem space. Where I run into frustration is when the trade-offs are misrepresented. And I think we run into a lot of territory where
yes,
where the trade-off set is being marketed one way, and the reality of that trade-off, the reality of that trade-off is just lying.
And then everybody goes scream on Twitter. Mine is better, yours is worse, because nobody can agree on like what is the truth about each of the trade-offs, right?
There's a quote I really like: "The liars make the best promises."
Right. Exactly, right? And it gets very fun and weird with open source because like people can go read the code. It's not like an empty, the marketing promise could be empty, right? But like it's still verifiable in most things in this space, right? Which makes it for an extra fun dynamic, right? You can still go and dunk on the liar with like a line of GitHub. There's some like poetic justice to that.
The only true quote tweet.
That's right. This is always an interesting conversation. All right. So boosts. Thanks everyone. Okay. So top booster QXOTK. Hey, do not read the boosts. Maybe I should follow your request. And then Dubravko, pro tip: if you slow the podcast down to 1 speed or slower, you can put your toddler to sleep. Also, really gotta set up 2 FA equipment. Okay. Connor Kepnick, good episode. The Wild Hustle, let's go. Plebe Huddle, is there a Nostr signing app plugin for Graphene OS? Your favorite mobile OS? Tongue face. Oh, also best app for music creators. They allow them to post songs and get zapped. I think Wavelake, right, is one ways of you posting music. If you're doing stuff live, go on zap.stream. I'm not sure about signing apps plugins for Graphene OS. Z-Doxed. That's a great username. Great mumble tech. Undefined. Great chat. My quality could improve. Most important thanks to all developers on the space. I think it was me on the last episode. I was coming back from equivalent of a strep throat. So essentially, I sounded like I had a train in my throat. Monk Cactus smoked some crack after this episode. Okay. Glad we can give you this kind of incentive. All right. Bitcoin Off Tech. Any updates to Bitcoin that you guys feel like you need to mention? I'd like to mention the Bitcoin mailing list, maybe. So I ran into this problem trying to sign up for Google group where the Bitcoin dev mailing list moved to. And I don't want to create, I de-Googled myself. So I was not able to join with a non-Google email for a while. And then I figured out that the problem was that the Google email, my non-Google email was linked as an alternative account to a Google email. So that prevents people from sometimes joining that, subscribing non-Google. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Google Groups, but outside of that, the mailing list seems to function as it was via email if you don't open Google. Search is better. What else? The BIP, what took me to the mailing list was the BIP editors discussion, which is a bag of hurt. It's undefined, as everything in Bitcoin should be. Undefined means ungameable, that easy. My personal preference is that we move to a setup where we have a lot of BIP editors or number assigners just to remove some very obvious spam and let people create BIPs for the ideas that they have. BIPs were not designed to be implemented into Bitcoin Core. They were just a way for people to share their proposal. There's many BIPs that were never integrated into Core. And there is many BIPs that will never be, like drive chains. And anyways.
What would you say the ratio is of merged BIPs versus what Bitcoin Core is striving to implement?
I'm going to pull a number out of my ass, but I'll say 20-30%.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, Bitcoin Core moves very slowly. So, someone could propose a BIP. Nobody on the Bitcoin Core team would necessarily say we should never implement this. But, actually getting around to implementing it, getting the PR merged is just, 5 years, and who knows if it's ever going to happen.
Working as designed. I just want less drama on the BIP assignment numbers. I feel like, if it's relevant to Bitcoin, meaning, you're not putting a ERC20 token BIP, you should, and the language is professional, right? We can have some very basic standards here, for academic sort of proposals, right? That are not sort of borderline censorship kind of thing.
But the thing is that the only thing that this process serves right now is effectively to disallow anyone to effectively DDoS the namespace for BIPs, right? Because I made that point on a space the other day, which is you look at the most perhaps consequential, like it or not, change or proposal that's Bitcoin related in the last 5 years. That's ordinals, and they didn't get a BIP number. They have sufficient documentation for everyone to be able to implement in a reliable way, right? So, I mean, it becomes pretty, it seems untenable for the existing process to remain as it is, but it seems like that the people involved are obviously keen on keeping it like that.
I mean, I don't blame maintainers, right? It's a pain in the ass to deal with spam or to a bunch of like stupid shit. But you can't just say it's stupid shit because you get in trouble. Now it's censorship.
I don't even know if that's going. I don't even know like whether or not that would actually materialize. Like who's going to like start creating bips out of thin air and push that to like a repo or whatever. It seems to me like that if we encounter this problem, maybe we find a way to resolve it. But I don't know if it's an actual problem.
I have a good idea. Why don't we use 2 words as the namespace for bips? So then you can have 6 million bips, like depending on how you want to curate your list, but about 6 million bips of entropy there. Just 2 words. So instead of having a BIP number is a BIP name, and the BIP name is going to be, I don't know, like door elephant. And then that's it, like, door elephant. And if you combine door elephant with like, I don't know, like fridge apple, it's just, that's it. Like the problem is when you create very restrictive entropy spaces, right? Especially canonical entropy spaces, humans cannot help but to fight for it. Everybody wants to, the smallest, I mean, like I love my 3-letter username on Twitter, right? Like, and the entropy space on that is very tiny. So anyways, maybe we just need to move to something where people can't really fight over. Maybe they just don't want the words they got assigned, but that can be random. Nobody's going to go for it, but it's okay.
I just learned recently you can like encode lat long with like 3 words, something like that.
Yeah.
So you could just tell somebody like meet me at like donkey, apple, elephant, and
yes,
I think that's pretty fun.
That's right. I mean, we do that to we have 256 bits, from 128 bits of words, 12 words. It works. All right. News and noteworthy. We talked about BitVM, HRF. They have integration webinars for nonprofits. That's kind of cool. Umbro has approved integrated Bitcoin knots. Look at that. You can run knots on your Umbro. Google starts indexing Bitcoin data in search engine. That's both scary and weird and interesting. I'm surprised it took this long, but because they always had addresses, remember? And then it kind of disappeared. I don't know. I don't use Google anymore for a long time. So Lightning Codebase select Lightning Spark for Lightning. Emboss launches Reflex. There was some drum around this. I don't know much about it.
This is pretty. I mean, I know we're moving into past the second hour here.
Yeah, no, we're gonna turn off soon.
Yeah, no, but I mean, this is pretty interesting. I think I mentioned on Twitter the other day that I hit peak bearishness on Lightning just a couple of months ago, and I'm starting to become a little more optimistic. I think this is significant news, but this is also kind of like pretty telling as far as how things will start playing out with Lightning, where you're most likely going to have very regulated paths and routes and channels. So, and considering the amount of liquidity that might move through there, it's going to make things pretty challenging, I think, for US-based LSPs especially. So, I mean, it's a positive in terms of adoption and liquidity probably, but there's going to be, it's now that someone like Coinbase entered the game, you're going to have to be a lot more concerned about privacy and stuff like that. So hopefully there's some work with this.
I mean, I was surprised. Lightning was always designed to be kind of hub and spoke, right? So, and all the trade-offs that come with that for privacy and everything else.
I do think it's interesting. It says Coinbase will be using Lightspark's remote key signing implementation, with the Lightning signing keys entirely held by Coinbase while Lightspark hosts their Lightning node. So that's just a fun little technical detail.
I mean, I don't blame them. Like doing key custody for hot things is scary, right? I mean, and then if you're like some qualified custodian, whatever they're gonna be, like legally speaking, that comes with all kinds of like liabilities and insurance concerns, and so you have to check the boxes. And building these kinds of things are not easy. We all know, right? In Bitcoin, there is no backsies.
Yeah, I feel like when the Lightspark announcement happened a while back, there was a lot of dunking on it, and it did seem like an extreme amount of VC for what they're building. It's like we already. What's another meme was we have Lightning at home, like we have hosted enterprise Lightning services home. Like nothing Lightspark was doing was like super special or felt like a huge differentiator. But the fact that they were going to drive so hard at enterprises, I mean, I'm excited if people can spend, like. Right now, for most of the crypto ecosystem, like Lightning, like appears like it's another coin, and there's like swap fees to it. And I think if especially you have a custodial Bitcoin balance, it totally makes sense to make that custodial Bitcoin balance spendable via Lightning. And the fact that Lightning is becoming that, I believe, that standard for actually how you actually make the payment. Like if you're using Fedimint, how you actually make the payment is Lightning. And I want that to be basically I want the best way to spend your Solana be paying a Lightning invoice. And so I feel like this is theoretically one step in that direction.
I think the most interesting thing for me in this announcement is actually the fact that they took so long to do it. The only reasonable answer I can come for why it took so long is not the fact that they couldn't do it. That was obviously not the case. It was the fact that, in my view, they were hoping that some other layer 2, one which was more under their control, would become the default. So you can imagine a world of VC companies who are like them, and you basically have your sort of account with them, and it's very like .com kind of era. And that was the way you transferred Bitcoin amongst each other. And they just had some kind of back-end settlement process. That was the layer 2. I suspect that was what Coinbase was hoping was going to become the layer 2, because their rent seeking on that would have been way more than what they're likely to get out of a more decentralized protocol.
I don't even I wouldn't even ascribe even that much sort of like thinking and incentive sort of towards that. I think it's just demand. They have all this demand for all the shit coins that people casino, and they make a fee on that casino, right? And then there's just not a lot of demand for the Lightning stuff comparably, right? To if you look at how much transactions happen in an exchange's book per second, right? For that stuff versus how many Lightning payments happen, it's probably some insane difference there in orders of magnitude, right?
I think we assume they're stupid and haven't been on top of things, but realistically, also Lightning was just not working reliably well enough for them to make it work. The cost of potentially having hundreds of user support tickets coming in because their Lightning payment failed or whatever, and then there's the challenge of if you're offering Lightning payments, what wallet are you actually going to recommend, and are you actually in a legal position to recommend custodial wallets, because those are the ones that will be working, but can you actually can Coinbase legally recommend a wallet of Satoshi? Probably not. They're not going to tell their user, just put your money on the wallet of Satoshi. So then it's okay, well, what non-custodial wallet can they realistically recommend? The list is pretty short, and up until maybe a year ago, it was very challenging to get kind of reliable payment with Lightning. So I think they were waiting up until the point where, and you're seeing this convergence with Phoenix now. That's it's and the Phoenix server, the tools are available for companies like that to have an approach where it's I don't want to deal with any of that. You guys take care of it. And I think with Lightspark, they just found a partner that they thought was able to, match. I don't want to say the standard of quality that Coinbase is known for, because we all know that they kind of like to shit the bed a lot. But I mean, it's a big corporation, so at the end of the day, they gotta there's a lot of due diligence here.
Yeah, these guys live in the fiat universe, which is this exact dynamic shit show. These guys are not Bitcoiners. The smart one was Fred that left. Also, these guys are just like a slog and this ginormous thing. And, you know, like, look at them trying to do the same sailor thing with the bonds, right? They're coming late even for that. It's they're just very lucky to be the first mover in scale, legal, like a how do you call it, like regulated in scale sort of Bitcoin entity, right?
Yeah, they're the only exchange that's achieved regulatory capture, right? American regulatory capture,
Yeah.
and so they're going to get paid handsomely for that.
I'll tell you one thing that I feel might have been like what moved the needle for them as far as like Lightning is I think they have this ace in their pocket where Lightspark was like, okay, you guys are in bed with USDC and Circle. Let's do USDC on Lightning. And I know that it doesn't make a lot of sense from a technical perspective, but I can see why they would have been perhaps charmed with this idea of, okay, we're going to have this network and we're going to provide US dollar liquidity on Lightning. Because that's what Lightspark is aiming for. We've known that from a lot of their previous communications.
None of their shit is for us. You know, like it's not for, we are not the target market for any of this shit. Like, you know, we have like signing devices in our hands, you know, like, you know, we know where GitHub is. You know, it's very hard for us to sort of like wrap our brains around, our heads around like where their mind is at, their user base, and sort of like empathize with that. Like, it's just so distant.
But I mean, you could vastly improve the US Tether on Tron is so popular. It's like to send Tron, especially like self-custodially, you've got to like Tether on Tron. You have to also have Tron gas to send. Like there's you know, these are dumb, you know, old school. It's a simple old school on-chain sending to an address protocol, and then also more shitcoin bullshit on top of it to be able to send stable dollar amounts. So I totally agree. If you could be sending some Lightning dollar around, it has a potential to be popular, and it's obviously a huge market. So I could see why someone would be going after that.
And it should. I mean, like, you know, ETFs are a backdoor for Bitcoin to the traditional markets, right? So we can suck their value too. And, you know, the same is going to happen in payments. And you know, Bitcoin is going to be the basis of everything. And LibSac is going to be the only curve in the universe. You know, like, you can take this sort of train, you know, like it's exactly how this is playing out. Anyways, all right. I mean, you know, do you guys, any other news here, anything here? Or I think we reached, we're at 2 hours and 30 minutes. If people are not asleep by now, then I cannot help them. Listen, gents, this was a real fun episode. Lots of nice little deep tangents. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. Any final thoughts, Mr. Alex B?
Yeah, not really. I'm looking forward actually to Bitcoin Plus Plus. I'm hoping I'll be able to attend. That's somewhere later this or early in May. There's going to be a lot of super interesting chats about all things script and covenants. And hopefully maybe we can come to consensus or not, or just start throwing chairs around.
You don't mean going to the consensus conference?
But that's in Austin. I've never been to Austin. I know there's a good amount of Bitcoiners there, so yeah, hopefully I can make it out there.
Cool. Mr. Paul.
Yeah, I'm in Austin. Come on out. I just pay for Mutiny Plus. Just do it for me. Just do it just 1 month. Get an address. Just do it for kicks. Just a little practice with your Bitcoin.
Love it. Good show. Mr. Craig.
Try to be less angry, people. There are good reasons to be happy about life. Try to be a little less angry.
Mr. Harry.
All 4 of you have visited me at Bitcoin Park in Nashville before, and I look forward to having you all back again. And the state of our network is strong.
Good words. I'm going to probably be in BitBlock Boom in Dallas, and then I think I'm heading to Austin. So I'll go hang there for a little bit. Yeah, guys, you know, like, it's like go, you know, I think the meme go walk on grass is very timely again and again and again. Breathe a little. It's important and fun for people to sort of like, argue about specs, argue about projects, argue about categories, argue about this stuff. That's how we grow. But just smile a little, try to find some shit to do. Because, once Bitcoin wins, you're gonna be out of shit to be fighting for, At the end of the revolutionaries kill each other, right? And because that's all what they know what to do. So just chill. We're winning. Go find hobbies. And with that, I think we're closing this out. Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening. For more resources, check the show notes. We put a lot of effort into them. And remember, we don't have a crystal ball, so let us know about your project. Visit bitcoin.review to find out how to get in touch.